Well, three of us are involved in designing most of our clubs, and that's myself, Mike Nicolette, and Brad Schweigert. Over the years, what I noticed was the right equipment makes a huge difference. It became a fun thing for me to buy most of the clubs that were released, learn a lot about shafts, learn about what worked, what didn't. Most of the claims were exaggerated or hollow. I decided that, maybe one day I'd like to make my own clubs.
I'd probably known Bob for a year and a half or so, and I got a phone call out of the blue one day, and he said, hey, I have an idea you might be interested in.
And, I started talking to him about, what are the constraints you guys are up against? He said, all of us in this business, we have to hit certain price points. We have to have certain timing.
And somebody asking you to create the most unbelievably high performance golf club, but it has to live in that price range.
And those constraints limit us with what we're able to do. And I thought, well, Mike, what would it be like if you had none of those constraints, no time constraints, no money constraints, you only had one constraint: performance. You think it could make a big difference? He goes, I think eventually I'd sure love to give it a try.
When I met with Bob, I did my best to talk him out of getting into the industry, because look, let's face it, this golf industry, the equipment side, is really, really tough industry. So I said, look, Bob, you're a really smart guy. Obviously, you've done very well in life. And I said, this is not a place where you want to invest your dollars. And he just kind of laughed a little bit, and he said, well, I have an idea that, we're not going to compete with everybody else. We're going to do something different. There was a point where I told him in this meeting, I said, look, Bob, I said, I know who I am and I know who I'm not. I said, I'm a good golfer and I'm a really good club designer. I said, I'm not a guy who starts a company from scratch. It's not me. But I know a guy who is probably the guy that you really want. And he said, well, who's that? And I said, that's my boss.
I'm Brad Schweigert. I'm the Chief Product Officer at PXG. So Mike and I work together at Ping. I was the Director of Engineering, and Mike worked for me as a Senior Designer. So I was pretty happy with where I was. Ping is a good company, and they had treated me well. And so I wasn't actively looking to go anywhere. I figured I was going to retire working for that company. But
it was funny because we were out at lunch one day.
I still wasn't, that sold on it. So I said to Mike, look, Bob's a billionaire.
He's a busy guy. People were tugging at him from every different direction. And this could possibly be just a pet project for him. And he goes, I don't want to give up my career for a pet project that could go away in a year. He said, so let's do this. He said, let's call him.
Let's face it, if he really, really is excited about this, if you call him, he's likely going to pick up the phone.
And if he answers the phone, I'll go meet with him. And he said, if he doesn't answer the phone,
we're in a pretty good spot. Let's just go back to work and forget about it. And so Mike called him. Bob picked up the phone in one ring and said, hey, Mike.
It was, hey, Mike. And I was like, hey, Bob, I'm sitting here with Brad, and he's interested. And he said, that's fantastic news. Let's try to get together and meet.
I think if he wouldn't have called, maybe we didn't go see him, or at least I didn't go see him, and maybe this whole thing didn't happen.
It was that close to potentially not happen.
I decided to take the meeting, and I went in, and immediately I was attracted to Bob's personality, his vision for what he wanted to do.
We had a one-year non-compete, so we sat out, for a year.
We worked on some different projects, including, stuff that was surrounding the periphery of the golf industry, but nothing in regards to equipment. So when we got started,
there was a conference room and a notepad and a piece of paper.
Nothing's more exciting than starting a business from a pad, a paper, and a pen, and digging a business out of it. And so
they come into my office with a yellow pad, and they said, what are you thinking, Bob?
We said, let's focus on irons first.
I'm looking for something that looks like a blade, but is more forgiving than a cavity back. Those are polar opposites. Those are not things that mix well.
I'd like to see something that's a little oversized, has some nice offset.
It has to go further than any other product in the marketplace.
I'd like to have a sweet spot the size of Texas and feel outstanding.
And I was like, is that it? And he said, no, it has to look different than any other club out there. He goes, it's got to look really rich
and distinctive, and it's got to be sexy, brother. And his Bob only he can do voice.
And they looked at me and go, is that it?
When we left his office, we start just bouncing around ideas off of each other. Brad's an engineer, I'm a designer, and so we started out. And to be perfectly honest, if Bob hadn't given us some direction on what to try to accomplish, we would not have ended up where we did with the Gen 1 iron. The first thing we said was like, hey, if it's going to go far, it's going to have a thin face. We're going to have to, allow the face to move to try to store some energy and get it back into the golf ball.
Well, if we're going to make something that's a blade but more forgiving than a cavity back, we're going to have to make it hollow. But there's a lot of challenges that come with it being hollow, mainly feel and sound, and so we're going to have to overcome those things.
We came up with some ideas, Brad and I, and then, we showed it to Bob, and he's like, well, let's do this, let's change that. How about the material on the inside? He had some material that, because he's a big motorcycle guy, called Zorbathane, and he said, this is a great vibration dampener. Maybe somehow we could get that on the inside of the club. And so, we explored that.
They know from being engineers, I know from studying it for 30 years. It's interesting how the ideas gel. I mean, at first they're not there, and eventually a little glimmer, and then, we arrive at something completely different from what we were thinking we were going to do, and a lot of times it works.
The challenge was there, and as an engineer, I'm a problem solver by nature, so, immediately we started trying to solve that problem. I knew that the construction itself, a hollow body product, has a lot of inherent benefits because of the fact that you're moving all the mass to the perimeter. It's going to have a higher inertia.
We were trying a hollow body club if it was going to look like a blade, and at first it went pretty good, didn't feel so good.
There was some side things that we learned along the way that I didn't anticipate.
There was no constraints as far as cost. We could do any number of things with materials. And so we got to look at, different alloys. We got to look at different materials for the inside.
When we first got our very first prototypes in, we tried to fill it with all kinds of different materials. We tried silicones, we tried this stuff called Lexols, things that you could buy off the shelf. We tried using foams, we tried all kinds of stuff. Nothing really worked. It all still kind of had that same hollowy feel, and it didn't, as a golfer myself, and Mike's a golfer, Bob's a golfer, it just didn't feel like what we wanted. It didn't have that real solid, sound. Once we figured out what material we were using, which on our Generation 1, it was a thermoplastic elastomer, TPE, we realized that it actually provided a lot of strength characteristics to the face, and it worked in conjunction with the body material to actually provide a higher level of structure and strength to the product, which allowed us to then make the face much thinner than what we ever thought was possible.
So the whole challenge of the Gen 1 iron was to make a perfect club in every possible way.
We had a direction we wanted to go, and then we started making prototypes, and eventually we kind of figured it out, and we generated a product that I think met all those requirements. It really hit the nail on the head on everything that he had asked for.
When we got the first prototype, Brad and Mike went down, and they were hitting it in one of our fitting bays.
It was like that aha moment. I remember hitting the first ball, and I turned around, and Mike and I, we were giving it like high fives, and we were going, wow, we really did it. This feels unlike anything I've ever hit before. And
it really gave us everything you wanted from a design standpoint, and as a golfer, everything you'd want from a performance standpoint.
And they called me and goes, Bob, we've had a breakthrough. And got down, and what a breakthrough it was.
Early on, Bob had Brad and I read a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and the gist of the book was this, is that when you start a business, the big thing is you have to be a disruptor. You have to do something different. A big company that's doing so well, they have a big piece of the marketplace, and somebody in their company comes up with a new idea. Well, they have to invest dollars in that idea, and the dilemma is basically, hey, if we start to chase this new idea, we basically have to tell the people that our old idea is no good, but we're catching plenty of fish over in this pond. So if we try to change ponds, there's a chance that we're not going to catch any fish at all.
So a lot of times you eliminate risk, you go with something that's certain, and you get the new product forward. The smaller companies that are just getting started, they have nothing to lose, and so they can take chances, and they can do things that people that are established in the industry just can't go out and do.
And basically what that says is that existing markets tend to do things the way they've always done them, and when something comes along, that is a little different. They tend to not pay too much attention to it. With the way the markets work and the way new products and new innovations take place, the existing market don't realize they've been stabbed till their shoes are full of blood.
And this was the whole deal of this company. He said, you know, we're not going to compete with the rest of the OEMs.
So it was really, let's just make the best thing that we possibly can. And when we're ready and we're confident that it's better than everything else that's in the marketplace, now we'll proceed and we'll come to market.
He saw, you know, a niche in the industry that people were not, you know, paying attention to. And that was, you know, that high performance luxury brand.
Bob had a hunch and had a vision that it was just an untapped market that was underserved.
Not one person knows everything. It just doesn't happen like that. It's really good as a collaboration.
It's a relationship that goes back and forth because we bring a lot of expertise to it. We bring a lot of the work to it, but he is definitely integrated as part of the team and coming up with ideas. He comes into the office all the time and asks what's going on, it weighs in on problems, weighs in on idea creation, on strategy.
And we all look at it from different angles. I look at it from a usability standpoint, and you know, I'm the guy that delivers the pass or fail grade.
He doesn't just give an idea and walk away. You know, when he's here at the office, which is pretty much every day, you know, he pops in and he says, "Hey, I have an idea on this. I have an idea on that."
There'll be times when we will all think going in that we have something special, and after a week I'll come back and I'll say, I don't think we do. But the most important thing is that when we release a product, something special.
I like to say that we just have a great synergy between, you know, Bob, Brad, and myself, and it's a real pleasure and honor to be able to, you know, to work with someone who's as enthusiastic as Bob is. You know, I love golf, Bob loves golf, Brad loves golf.
I mean, Bob didn't invest in this because he had to. He does it because he loves it and he wanted to be a part of it. It is a passion project, something that he loves, and he is definitely a part of the team. I've worked for him for about 6 years now, and it's just, I've learned so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity that he's given me for that.
We say we go to work, but we're not working. You know, we're having a great time, and we're trying to develop the absolute best golf equipment to make people be able to enjoy the game a lot more. But it's fun to work together as a team.